Beep. There we go. Hello. Welcome. Uh it's been a couple days. How are y'all doing? Morning, Cameron. No Face Gaming asked a question about light maps earlier. I don't know when that was. Um Light maps like generating baked lighting for static lights into textures or dynamic lights which can move. We are talking about baking lights into textures that you can then use to add to other lighting that is dynamic. So the lighting would be baked textures for specific meshes, and then that lighting, and then actually at some point we're going to get into probes and stuff too, which are slightly different. But yeah, baked lighting in terms of baking light into textures, and then using that in combination with dynamic lights. But the thing from the stream title is we can do that in Blender. It's just a little bit of a hassle. And since I build this thing for Blender and Bevy called Skein, I think we can automate all of the light map stuff. So that's what the second half of the stream title is referring to. Hey, Chris, looking forward to the stream. Hey, Anders, nice to see you. Hey, Keaton. Whew. One of the things I just want to start off easy and just do a couple of little conversions here. I don't remember if I had this fully working on stream. I don't think I did. Again, cannot find a Chrome window because that's just the way that I roll. No Chrome windows, apparently. Just pull one in from the great beyond. Right, because 3007 is the wrong port. Oh, why am I? Oh, I know. I remember why I'm in light mode. Hang on. I can't I can't function in light mode on the regular. I can only do that for recording talks that need to be given on a projector. Okay, so Garden. This introduction to shaders post is typist post, entirely typist, which is sick because it's sitting here with all my other markdown posts. And we've got all the metadata we need. We've got the tags showing up. We can click into it. It's got the view transition. And then we've got outline for typist, headings, paragraphs. This is a figure with an image and a footnote. If we click on the footnote's way down here. I guess this is technically a bibliography citation, which is cool. Bunch of other stuff. I think you remember saying you only use new and streams videos in a different shell otherwise. Is that still the case? That is maybe very outdated from a long time ago. I use new shell for everything. Like everything. I use if I'm gonna script. Wow, that Chrome window really was all the way on the end, wasn't it? If I'm gonna script things in like a just file, like you can see here, this is really messy, so excuse my personal scripting habits. But you can see user bin and Venu here. I use new shell in general. If I'm gonna do GitHub Action scripts, I have new shell installed and I write new scripts. New shell is anytime you see me open a terminal, that's new shell. I also use new shell off stream. That is my primary terminal. New shell is, for anybody that doesn't know, I guess I could bring. New shell is a terminal. If you haven't picked a terminal and you don't really understand terminals yet, if you open a terminal on Mac OS these days, you get a shell called Z shell. And what ends up happening, or what used to end up happening, is that you used to get bash or something else. And bash is old. It's fine. People like it for various reasons. It's decent at what it does, but it's old. And there's a number of features that people like to have in their terminals, autocomplete, et cetera, et cetera. So people end up using different shells, Z shell being one of them. Fish is another one that's pretty popular. I've never used fish, but I've heard good things from people who have used it. Z shell comes, or doesn't come with, but if there's if you're just going to use like raw Z shell, there's this thing called Oh My Zish that handles a bunch of like plugin installations and stuff and themes. There's a lot of really cool stuff in here with aliases and integrations with different applications and all sorts of things, which is really fantastic. But in the end, or a couple of years ago, I think, at this point, I switched to New Shell. And I switched to New Shell a long time ago at this point. I don't remember if I made a video on it. I think I probably mentioned it in some videos around the time, but it's been years at this point since I switched to primarily driving New Shell. And the reason that I primarily drive New Shell is because I don't need any third-party tools anymore to open things like a cargo.toml and get the dependencies and check, like, I don't know. I think it's called name at the top here. Right. What is at the top here? It's just a list. Yeah. So open cargo toml, get dependencies, get nom, I have the dependency. I can get, I guess notify is another one in here. Optional version. Like I can just deal with data pretty nicely, which I am very, very, very into. Like this is very much like a daily thing for me, where I just dive into some toml file, some JSON, some whatever, and have to do something with it. And that's what gets me into, like, let's see, over here we have, this is my personal site. So this is a New Shell script where the first thing I do is ls all of the content, which gives me structured data in a table for all of the fields that you would get back, like type and name and things like that. If I wanted to, I could transpose this and look at all the names for all the columns, name, size, type, modified, etc. But then I can pipe this through to like get name. I can use path utils. I can turn that into text and then pick one. So this is using skim at the end of the pipeline. And now I just get to pick one, and I don't know, maybe I'm working on introduction to shaders, and that pops out. So if I'm going to watch a post specifically, this New Shell script will allow me to do so. I don't need to specify one. It'll pick up all the stuff that I just did, allow me to choose one. I choose one, and then it starts the typist watch process for the post that I was using, which is sick, right? And building these kinds of scripts gives you actual real like if else support and language support and variables and functions and all those kinds of things. So I really like New Shell for a variety of reasons. That's just a couple of them. I'm very much like not a shell purist or whatever. So like there are plenty of good shells. I just really like new shell for a variety of reasons. And it's been working well for me for a number of years. Hey, Crow 3. It was a few months ago. You were trying to figure out how to get JQ-like functionality for YAML CSVs, XLCS, XLS, X. That's not what you said. That's Excel. Then you remember new shell stuff and committed to making it a primary shell, though. Yeah, I mean, you can definitely use it as a secondary shell. You can definitely use it as like your primary shell with your secondary shell as a backup. That's one of the really nice things about shells is like if I really wanted to, for whatever reason, if I was like new shell isn't cutting it for whatever task I'm doing, I can drop into Z shell and now I'm in Z shell. I don't have a lot installed in Z shell anymore, so I don't have like the oh my zish fancy terminals and stuff. But then I can like, if you type exit or hit Control D, you pop back out of that shell. So you can start with new shell or whatever. You can drop into Z shell, fish, or whatever you want. Pop back into new shell whenever you want. Shells are cool. Shells are very cool. But yeah, I'm very happy with new shell. I'm very, very happy with new shell. Okay, so the thing that I want to do here is I've got these posts. This introduction to shaders one has a published date, but it really shouldn't. So I'm just going to comment that out. It's also nice that Typist will let me actually use comments, and that will not show up on the site anymore. Right, so it's no longer in the list, and all I did was comment it. Lightmaps. What are you asking about lightmaps? Lightmaps were, if we do lightmaps, I guess we can switch over to lightmaps if that's what people are interested in, for sure. We already did lightmaps for Blender. I think I still have that open. So TLDR of lightmaps for Blender is that if you have a cube like this, you've got some meshes. So I've got 2 cubes and a plane. Actually, do I have the... Do I have the project that I was using to run this? I think this is it. Let's run this. Okay, we're going to let that run. This is the lightmap stuff in Blender. If you go into, I don't know how familiar people are with Blender. Blender usually has objects and meshes inside of them in the outliner over here. If we go down to the green triangle, you can see that I've got 2 UV maps for each of these things, each of the meshes. This is a convention. Bevy specifically, if you have a second UV map, we'll use a second UV map for the light maps. So I'm choosing to like create that ahead of time, just like as a project cleanliness kind of thing. But not everything requires being light mapped. So not everything would require having this second set of UVs. And then once we do that, we took a couple of approaches on the last stream. One of the approaches was to set up that UV map with a specific image inside of the shader, which we could then bake to as a target. And this works. And you'll notice that on the right-hand side here, we've got plane.lightmap, which hopefully I can just open. But these are embedded images in the blend file. So if I go here on the left, this should have something somewhere, right? Can I just view this? Come on. There we go. Plane.lightmap. Plane.lightmap in here is a baked light texture for what happens to be the plane. So the first cube here in the middle is touching the plane, which is why it's all black. It's got some shadows because we've got a point light in the scene. Second cube over here on the left is not actually on the ground, even though you can't really tell from the scene here, which is why we've still got a fairly hard edge here, but not entirely because it's not fully, and then it fades out to the shadow over here. And then basically once you have this image, you have to associate that programmatically with your meshes in Bevy. So if we go check that out, the way that we've set this up is scene instance ready. So add observer scene instance ready. We are spawning the demo.gltf scene 0. When that spawns, this code runs and we go through all of the descendants of the scene. Specifically, we're going to find all of the GLTF meshes. And if, this is hard coded here, if it's plane, cube, or cube 1, then we translate those to each of these baked images. And these baked images are the light maps for each of these textures. So the goal of light maps in Skein would be to make this workflow better, basically. There's the Bevy side, which means that we have to have some kind of manifest from names of meshes and things to images that they would use. But other than that, once we have the mapping, throwing that into a light map component is really all we need to do. Would you still be able to light the shadow part with a dynamic light to see the grass? Yes, you would. So the baked lighting is not it's not overriding everything. It's in combination with everything else. Is the way that I would frame it. So if this scene ever renders, the scene ever compiles, this scene has a point light that moves around it. So you'll be able to see that in a second here. Sorry, this was completely not compiled at all. So we're going from scratch over here. I don't know why I get notifications to watch my own stream that I'm doing live. That's so weird. It's like, hey, did you know Chris is live? You should go watch. Like, yeah, I think I knew that. Love to see people using New Shell. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of New Shell. I've had idle thoughts of like doing a website that was basically how to use New Shell for, you know, educational purposes and whatnot. Trying to help people get into shells in general. Never really did that. But it would be cool. You should watch. It's a good stream. I'm still back by 8 minutes. Your biggest problem is that you know Bash way too well. We'll probably be stuck with it until you might write your own. Writing your own seems like a fun project. It also seems like a ton of work. A ton of work that people have already done. So this is the light map scene on the right here. Exposed for self-subbing. I do have an account that I watch, or I used to have an account that I watch stuff on and an account that I publish stuff on. And then it just became too much hassle to go back and forth. And now I just watch everything on the account that I publish on, which, you know, might bite me one day. Do it. You just rewrote all your scripts that work with it. Make a code mod. Make a code mod for what? New Shell seems like a lot of learning for little benefit for your own personal self, but if someone streamlined that process, maybe. I mean, installing it and using it is super easy, right? Like, it's the same way you install anything else. You can just cargo install New Shell. I might not have like sold it because I really wasn't trying to sell it to people before. I was just kind of saying that I like it. But to me, if you're using Bash right now and you're like an old Bash head, you might not like the fact that there is like structured data in your shell. You know, you might like the idea that everything's strings and you can just pipe everything around and whatnot. But I really like that there are actual data structures that I can work with, so I can pass real data from like command to command over the pipeline. This uses, I guess, an HTTP GET for, like, you can still use curl and stuff. You don't have to use this HTTP GET, whatever. Like, it integrates with everything super well too. Is this an image? Why is that an image? I want to copy that. You're currently on Z Shell. You're not married to it. Z Shell's fine. There's nothing wrong with Z Shell. You know, I think that it's like Z Shell is like a better bash. I think Fish kind of falls into that line too. You found that staying in Z Shell and sometimes pulling out new shell when you're frustrated with regular shell scripting is kind of a nice on-ramp. Yes. I think that anything that's big like this, if you're switching keyboards, if you're doing, you know, a shell switch, if you're doing anything that is going to cause you potentially to have to bail out, having both options around and defaulting to the new one is always a great option. You just use bash, you'll check out new shell. Yeah, new shell is really cool. I do really like new shell. There's some other things that I didn't really mention either. There's a whole plugin system, and because the Polar stuff is built in Rust, they actually expose data frames in the shell via new shell. So you can just load stuff in as a data frame and then operate on it. I can't say that I deal with data frames all that often, but I've always found this fascinating. You get like a shell standard like data frame interface. How bad can you derail the stream today? That's the question. Does the stream even have a point? Can you derail from a stream whose purpose is to derail? Let's see. Yada yada, parallelism, plugins. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not here to sell new shell. I just like it. Structured data is nice. Your biggest problem is that you tend to have too much fun with file descriptors, and most new shells don't really support that. Cool. We all just hanging out. You actually kind of actually want to see Skein though, because you have yet to do it. Skein is trivial. Are you a Blender person? Like, do you know Blender, Yoda? Because if you know Blender, like, the sales pitch for Skein is trivial. You've dabbled. Okay, so you know roughly that there's stuff in the scene, you can spawn new cubes, etc., etc. Blender has a bunch of different kinds of types of stuff. Here's a light, for example. There's some light data here. This cube comes as basically like an object with a mesh inside of it. When you bring like the default cube into Bevy, you end up getting two entities. You get one for the object and then a child that has the mesh and the material stuff on it. So if I was going to sit here and do something on this cube, right? And I can just go down to the Skein Bevy panel and say, I don't think we have any AP or any components here actually for our demo. Let's add one. So here, what I'm going to do is basically, oh, here's character, actually. I just didn't usually do the thing where I usually rename it. This is also using the RC, huh? Why is this using the RC? Shrug. So we've got character here, right? And character is a component. It implements reflect. It reflects the component data. That's really all you need. Once you have that, you can just type the component name in here. You fetch the data from the running application. It stores it in the blend file, so then you don't need to keep the application running. If you want to insert the character component onto this cube object, you do it here. In this case, we're inserting onto the mesh, so I insert it. And then it gives me the form to fill out. I don't know, this is like Chris Cube. Right? And now this mesh has a component on it. So when it spawns the scene inside of Bevy, that component will just get instantiated. That's the entire sales pitch. The entire sales pitch is you can put components on stuff inside of Blender now. I guess there's other interesting things, like if there were defaults for this, we could set defaults. Right, if this was default and I like import default character, and this default was like, oh, I don't know, blue cube, the name of the and we run this assuming Rust Analyzer is wrong about whatever it's yelling for. I changed my builder to the root builder, and I think I re-enabled Rust Analyzer / cargo fighting for my targeter. So I need to fix that. How does Bevy know that the scene is a Skein enabled scene? How does that get wired? That is super easy, actually. GLTF has a bunch of like nodes and whatever, right? Are you familiar with the GLTF file? You know what it looks like? This is what it looks like. So we've got some scenes. Here's the default scene. Default scene is scene 0, right? If we say scene 0, which is this index in the array, has some nodes in it. These nodes are like, here's the cube mesh, here's a camera, whatever. The way this data comes in, I think I can just export it here. Let's do testing. Doesn't matter that I misspelled that. Export. So here's the mesh that we added that data on, right? We've got the name of the cube, we've got the primitives that point to the vertex data, etc. And there's this thing called GLTF extras where you can kind of just like hang arbitrary data. It's in GLTF extras because Bevy has really good support for GLTF extras. In the future, I want to make this an actual extension, but I have to make a PR upstream to enable arbitrary extension processing first. But this will go into an extension. Currently, it's in GLTF extras. So you can see this Skein array just has an array of all of this data. And all this data is just component data, like just regular component data. The format that this component is in is the format the reflection infrastructure in Bevy needs. So this is the type name, module path, whatever, to the component, followed by the data in the value. If we look at the Chrome window that I've lost yet again, and we go to Skein, the way this gets inserted is super trivial, actually. Basically, this is an observer. It observes the GLTF extras component getting added. All this is error handling. And then basically it says, hey, if the Skein array is there and it has stuff in it, then iterate over each of those components, use the reflect infrastructure to deserialize that component into a value, and insert it. So commands entity insert the reflected value. So like overall, you're inserting JSON data onto these nodes and entities and types in Blender. And in Bevy, you're using that data when you spawn the scene, and it automatically inserts that component data as a component. You've only ever used Blender for some 3D models and not really as a full scene solution. This is opening some new options for me, hopefully. Cool. Out of curiosity, how noisy does the GLTF that Blender gives out tend to be? What do you mean by noise in this case? I think is my question. I think if I think about the kinds of data inside of the GLTF file, it's not packed like a protocol buffer would be packed. So it's got the name fields for all the JSON data. If you consider that noisy, then it's very noisy because it's just JSON, right? But otherwise, it's just the data that you have exported to the GLTF file. So it's like the nodes, the meshes, the metadata about those, how to access that data in the binary buffer that it also exports, things like that. Let's say you create a model with components all wired up and you want to clone it. Is there an easy way to do that? Like, do you get some sort of reference to scaffold for any specific full object? You just hit Control D. The data is, I put a lot of effort into making sure that the data here was like done in a Blender way. So like you can see as I'm clicking around, I just duplicated that cube and it has this data. So like if I type 1 here, right? Like the data got duplicated and now you can modify it. So both of these cubes have it now. Like everything here works with Blender's data model. There's no like, I'm not maintaining a second set of like data processing or anything. I put a lot of effort into just doing things the way Blender wants them done. And thus we get all these benefits, like all this data gets stored in the blend file. If you duplicate, the data comes with it, etc. There's multiple ways to duplicate as well. Alt-D versus Shift-D, right? If you do an Alt-D, you end up getting the data tied together for these two because they're instances of the wrong word, but like the object data is tied together. If you Shift-D, you get a new one. So if I type 3 on this one, then this is 2, this is 2. If I change this back to 1, then this is 1, but this one's still 3. So like you can duplicate things in different ways inside of Blender. All of the component data that you've put on a thing is still going to be there, depending on how you duplicate it. If it's like literally the same thing, or if it's the phrasing for this inside of Blender is really confusing because it's called object and object data. And then you're like, what does that mean? They're two different things. They're two different sets of data. The object data and the object data data. Hella confusing. I don't know why they did it like that. Must have been a legacy decision, but yeah. So you end up with these things that have, you know, like linked object data effectively. There's a whole bunch of other ways that you can do things like this. If you want to get really complicated, you can do multi-blend file workflows and pull in assets via the asset browser and then use like overrides to modify them. That's a little, I think it's a little intense for most people's use cases. It's not deep copy versus non-deep copy because specifically, well, kind of, yeah. I mean, you're right in a sense, right? There's like Shift-D and Alt-D, and Shift-D and Alt-D do that, you're right. But really the difference is that this mesh data is called object data properties. And this object is called the object, and they both have properties. So there's the object properties and the object data properties. And whether you Shift or Alt-D is whether they link the object data or not. Blender's been around forever. You sure there's a ton of extremely strange artifacts of that time? Yeah, I mean, it's like what we're shipping version 5 soon, which I just implemented support for in Skein a couple weeks ago. Yeah, I mean, it's a whole thing, right? Delete these things. And then eject this hard drive that I have sitting here doing nothing. If I can figure out how to do that. How do I eject a hard drive on Windows? Like that. Cool. No reason to have a hard drive plugged in like that. But yeah, but there's like a whole bunch of really cool stuff inside of Blender too, right? Like there's like Blender Kit, right? If I wanted to pull in a material, I could pull in one of these materials. I could throw one of these materials onto this object by dragging it out. And then that'll be, I don't know, a rock or aged black metal or matte noise or whatever. And when you export, those all come in as standard materials and you can put components on all these things and then et cetera, et cetera. You guys will go through the Skein website and file issues when the docs are rough. Please do. Yeah, absolutely. There should be a whole, you should be able to get started. I've put a decent amount of effort into the docs. So like you'll drag this onto Blender, this like literally just drag this onto Blender and then start reading here. And there's a quick start and like what this does and what it is. I need to update that. I forgot to update there's the first issue. This explains kind of what it does. I'm going to remove this note at some time, I think. Now that 0.17 does automatic registration. Talks a little bit about BRP, what it does, has a bunch of screenshots, tells you to fetch the registry, etc. So yeah, if you do that, you've run into any issues, file issues, and that is stuff that I really care about. So we'll definitely fix that or look into fixing that. Where's Blender? There's Blender. So we end up with this like situation in which we have to do the baking inside of Blender, right? Here's our project. Here's my notes from last time, basically. Let's just create some new comments down here. So let's say you have a scene and you want to bake for that scene. There should be a bake button, right? Click the bake button, it bakes for the scene. The thing that I don't think we can do, or the thing that's out of scope, is going to be not baking stuff that hasn't changed. We're just going to start off with rebaking everything. So in Blender, when you hit bake, it is going to not save that file. When you hit bake, what is going to happen is it needs to check to see if UVs exist. This is like for all meshes, right? This is going to be like a bake all scenes button, I think. I don't know. It's TBD. I think that the there's some stuff that comes up around if you start doing this kind of light baking and you're instancing meshes inside and whatnot. How does that all work? But basically, we're gonna imagine you have one scene, a bunch of stuff in it, bunch of meshes. So for all meshes, check to see if second UVs exist. I don't think we need to create them. I feel like since Bevy kind of like bakes in the idea that the second UVs are for light maps, maybe we just create the UVs on all of the meshes like immediately if it doesn't exist. This can also do some weird stuff. It'll like anytime we create or remove data in general, it's an opportunity for a bug. So the question is how much value does ensuring that there's a second UV map for all these things, like how much value is that providing? Because we don't necessarily need to, right? We could offer an option. So we check for the UVs. If we have the UVs, then great. If we don't have the UVs, then not great. We need an image. So ensure image per mesh is created. So if we look at Blender and we look at the scripting page, and we look at the images, this has a ton of images in it, a bunch of thumbnails, a bunch of other stuff. But the bake groups are really the interesting thing. Or like the plain light map, for example, is really interesting. So we have to create these images that are associated with these meshes. So the question is, how do we associate those things? And I think there is, roughly speaking, two options. We can either go into the shader nodes and like create image node, use UV map, etc. Or we can create images, tie to object or tie to mesh via Skein Lightmap image property. I think this is what we're going to end up doing. So for all meshes that you want to bake, right? Because you should be able to enable, disable lightmap for mesh. Right? You should be able to enable, disable lightmaps. And right now I'm just thinking about this per mesh because that's kind of how it works in practice. But in the future, we might want to be like something a little bit more coarse-grained. Also, there's going to need to be some like visualizations of like what in my scene has light maps enabled, like all that kind of stuff, like introspection of what's actually going on. So I think we're going to create images and tie them to the mesh via the Skein Lightmap image property. And then there's going to be an export at some point, which I think is a separate process here. Export versus solo render. I think no matter what, we store everything the same way, and then you can choose to write this to disk or not. So for all meshes, we check to see if the second UVs exist, maybe create them. We ensure the image per mesh is created if it hasn't been created yet. These are, how do I phrase this? The names don't really matter. I think that the naming of this is going to get interesting because really what I want is like a unique image that is a container for the data that we're going to render the light map into. And it doesn't really matter what it's named. Users are never going to see it, but it would be really nice to go through the images in the blend file and be like, oh, this is associated with that mesh named this. Now, if you rename meshes and stuff, then I don't know how we would deal with that. I think that the image will get created with the original name, and then it just won't change over time. I think that'll really be the answer. Maybe we could do image renames and stuff, but I don't know how worth it is. So we need the image to be there, and then we need to call cycles to bake. Combined to image. Once cycles is done for everything, right, for all meshes, then we have all the images that we need. I think problems that I can see people running into are around the creation, removal of UVs. Right. Renaming, deleting sounds like a garbage collection question. This isn't garbage collection per se, because these won't be, they're going to be associated via like ID inside of Blender, right? So we're going to have images. They're going to be created in the images, you know, set of stuff. They're going to have names, and those names are going to be used inside of this, what did I call it? Skein Lightmap image property. So we will always have a one-to-one correlation between an image that should be used as a light map and a mesh that is going to use it. I think there's things that I need to figure out here in terms of duplicates, Alt D, Shift D, right? Realistically, even if they're exact duplicates, complete instances, they probably still get their own light map. Because if they're placed in two different places in the scene, then the light hits them differently. So I think that's the answer to that. But that makes the question of how do you store this data a little bit more complicated. If it's one-to-one with something like mesh name light map work, that's the general idea. I think that the complication comes in when, so for example, if we get in here and we do like Shift D here, right? And Shift Z and put this, I don't know, over here somewhere. So this is cube 1 and cube 5, which is great. But if I create a collection and I shift cube 2 into it, right? So we've got collection 2, which is cube 2 and cube 5, which is object mesh, right? And we do a Shift A. Where are the instances? Collection instances, collection 2, right? This is a collection instance. I know the origin is offset. That's not really the problem that I'm thinking of right now. So we've got this instance, right? And what is that instance when it comes to this mesh? right? If you're using collection instances, we need a light map per mesh. So this is the original collection, right? The original root object. And this is an instance of that object. Which means what exactly, right? Like there's, I think, one mesh here. Let's check actually. So there should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 meshes in this scene. Let's go into the scripting tab if I can navigate to it. Let's do bpi dot meshes, bpi.data, data.meshes. It's got a collection of 8 things, so maybe a few more things than I thought were here. Haven't closed this in a while, so probably all the old things that I created and deleted are in here, which is also interesting. So we've got a couple of users on cube and cube 1, cube 5, and plane. So 4 things have users, which is important. Is there one or multiple ways to create quote unquote instances? Do the instances have unique names and IDs? There is at least 2 ways that I can think of that would fundamentally affect things like this. One of them is collection instances, which is literal instances, like automatic instancing style instances. They are the exact same thing put in 2 places. Then there's obviously Shift D, Alt D. Shift D, Alt D. For us, luckily, kind of create a new mesh name. So I think those just work by default. And then there's multi-blend file workflows, which bring in assets and then do library overrides on those assets. And that is just a complicated situation, which may or may not end up with meshes that even have the same names as other meshes in the current file. So that needs kind of like additional consideration. And it's why we will always have kind of a UUID or a hash on the end of this light map image. What do I do here? Meshes, cube. I guess it's what? Cube 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are in here. And what we have here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So theoretically, we have 5 active meshes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So that's the problem. If we do this by mesh, then what we end up with is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 meshes here, some of which have been deleted, some of which are still here, one of which is actually literally a collection instance. And because it's a collection instance, we actually need to figure out how to track the light map to this collection instance instead of the mesh. So simple use case, we can get started just ignoring the collection instance use case and just saying, if you want a light map, you have to have like an actual name to mesh somewhere. But people use collection instances. This is a thing. It's absolutely a use case. We have to figure out what to do with that at some point. The weird part of collection instances, I think, is that they are literally not unique. I don't think there's any way in Blender to kind of like get a unique collection instance. Blender and store data on it. Blender Python collection instance ID. Let's see if there's something. User ID is ID per object. Just go to the Python docs. This person's looking for collection ID. index. Yeah, okay, so that's just getting the index. Does Blender give them some kind of global ID? No, it does not. Else you might be able to distinguish objects by position. Yeah, position would be interesting, but position is F32s, which is also a problem, right? Doing equality on the position locations is not a great idea. So one thing we could do, actually, there's a lot of things we can't do. If we think about collection instances are literal instances, right? We can't actually do anything to them. So really the only way that we can manage Lightmaps for collection instances is if for the collection, we go through all the meshes in that location, bake Lightmaps for them, and then find a way to associate them later. So we can probably, like, meshes is unique meshes, right? Where's Blender? But bpy.data, not types, bpy.data, of course, has basically no documentation. Blend data. Let's see, actions, armatures, brushes, cache files, cameras, collections. Collections is interesting. Let's check what collections has. Let's make these a little bit closer together, I think. Move this all the way over here. I think this is the right file, right? Yeah. So let's take a look at the scripting. And let's say collections. 2 collections. Collection and collection 2. So that doesn't help us because those aren't the instances. You can share the data over multiple instances in one hash map. Yes. We just need to find a way to identify the thing and then tie the light map to it, which we can totally do. The thing we can't do in that situation is tie the light map to it via data. We would have to, like, at the root here on collection 2, for the instance, I believe this is where we would need to put the extra data. Let's see. Collection 2, output, view layer, scene, world, object. I think. Because the other thing is that collections get collapsed when you export from Blender by default. They don't have to, but they just go away. Basically, they're like a kind of a like a Blender time construct. Like, collections don't exist once it's in the GLTF file. So we can put data, I think, on this instance. It's actually on this object, but in any case, I think collections and collection instances are just a general question mark. Because I really don't see a way to iterate over instances. Here's materials. Here's meshes. Meshes doesn't include the instance meshes. Scenes. I guess we could go down from scenes, maybe. Right? Here's our first scene. It's got scenes, and then this has node tree. Maybe. And then we would have to write a tree traversal for the node tree and find everything and hope that that has all of the meshes and doesn't weirdly pack stuff. Does the collection instance reuse the node on the GLTF? They would end up with the same Skein extras in the mesh from the original from the instance. Yes. All of the data. All of it. It's literally the same node in the GLTF file. If I exported this and my understanding is correct and I haven't forgotten anything, we should end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, sorry, 4 meshes, 5 nodes. That is not the way it's going to come out. I poorly explained that. Give me a sec. So we end up with 6 items in the scene. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is nodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So node, no, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's a couple of others. There's cube 2 and camera. We've got something named collection 2 here, which has a child that is 0, which is cube 2. So collection 2, cube 2. This doesn't use 0, it uses 1. So it has collection, which then has cube. And then this is just the cube with the mesh. So this is mesh 0, that's mesh 1. Here's mesh 2, here's mesh 3, and then here's mesh 0 again. So this cube 2 and this cube 2, which are both nodes, which have the same name. And we can see that the only place that this could possibly be coming from is this collection instance, right? You've got cube 2 as a node, as an object, right? And the only second place it's used is collection 2. So we end up getting 2 nodes. How exactly are the instances represented in GLTF? You would suspect there is some instance-specific data you should be able to set. There is, let's put this, let's do this. So collection is going to go away, right? Where is our GLTF extras? We're going to do this with custom properties, I think. Cycles object settings. That's interesting. Don't know where that came from. Let's see. Let's say this is the real collection, right? Using the key name instead of the actual values. And then here, like the real collection is here. So if we change this here and we go back, it's the same thing, right? There's no interior way to set these. Like these are literal instances, right? Is kind of what I'm getting at. They point to the same mesh data. Hey Ben, how's it going? Benjamin. Can you ask Blender for the index in the GLTF of an instance is going to have? The way that the GLTF export happens is via an extension. So Blender actually doesn't know anything about the GLTF export. That is entirely a Chronos GLTF export extension. Chronos GLTF extension. Which is not this. export Blender. Here we go. GLTF2 importer exporter. This is the repo for it. They ship like effectively an add-on here. Here's an exporter extension. This is what sits inside of Skein. So you end up with this requirement to register some stuff and do whatever. None of those are important. And then you get to hook in basically to the export process. So they have a whole set of Python code themselves. And then they call like custom callbacks effectively that you can register with them for all nodes and for everything like that. You're deciding whether getting groceries is worth having less time for programming. Probably. I think food is important. I would say I know what I would do. I would think about it for a while and then get distracted and forget and then not have groceries. That's what I would actually do. But you should have food. I'm going to encourage you to get groceries. And that's knowing that you work on things that I really like. Is shader in 64 food? Could it be? It's got enough data. Optimize your list so you spend as little time as possible getting groceries and spend all the time optimizing the list. I think I have all of them listed out in the scheme. Oh, you know what? Actually, this is listed somewhere. Here we go. This is all the documentation for the export hooks. All of it. There is no more documentation. If you want to know anything about what any of these do, you have to read the source code. I don't think there's a collection instances in here. There's a couple of node things here. There's definitely mesh things here. The meshes are all going to come out the same is my concern, right? So this is cube 2, which is an instance of that collection, right? Let's see, did we count down 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's all 6. We have all 6 here. Number 1 is the collection, the actual collection, with the cube instance inside of it. And then 6 is an instance of that collection. So we end up here with a node named collection 2 that points to a node named cube 2 that points to the mesh. And then down here we have a node named cube2 that also points to the mesh. So this has unique translation data compared to the other one, right? -2, -4, -2. Actually, does it? Hang on. -2, 10593, -2, 105. It doesn't even have unique translation data. What? Why does that not have unique translation data? Because that's relative to the collection? Hang on. Node 6 and node 1. Those are the two things. Let's just collapse everything else. So these two are exactly the same in this particular GLTF export with whatever settings I have enabled and whatnot. Better documentation than Windows RS safety docs. That's not what I like to hear. That's not good. Could you rename the instances to see how that changes the GLCF? Yes, we can absolutely do that. Let's call this instance 1. And then I think this actually collection in instance 1. And these two things you can see from the rename are literally the same thing, right? So if you see something in the outliner, that doesn't mean it's unique. If you see something in the outliner like this, it is literally the same thing. So I think the only thing we're really getting here is instance 1 becomes a node because it's the instance. Collection in instance 1, I think will go away. Assuming that I actually exported correctly. Oh, it did. You know what it did? It saved all of my folds, which is really funny. So this is instance 1. There is no collection anymore, right? There's nothing called collection in here. Nothing at all. Just did a search, found nothing. The only thing we get here is a node called instance 1, which is this first node. So this instance is a node. This cube is a node. And then this collection disappears. And we end up with another node named cube 2, where this collection should be. So this collection and this collection disappear. This moves to the root. And this gets a new node pointing to the same mesh. That's what happens. Can you add GLTF extras to arbitrary nodes? Yes. That is like 90% of what Skein does. The thing you can't do, I think, is like collection instances are literal instances, right? That's what I keep trying to say. So if we have data here and it says the real collection and we click on the other thing, these are literally the same thing. It appears twice in the outliner. It is literally the same thing. Like, you feel the solution is probably somewhere in the export hooks. Might be. It might be. I think this is the reason that I was kind of like, hey, we should do instances later. Because the way instances translate into GLTF data is not necessarily easily discoverable, and comes with a lot of kind of semi-confusing caveats often. So you can see here that like the mesh has that Lightmap, a Skein character component on it, right? And this is, I don't know, 0, 1. Cube 5 and cube. So this is cube and this is cube 5. And they have different instances of that component data. And then this is also cube 5. So it'll have the exact same representation here. Which is funny because once it gets into Bevy and this component gets inserted, it's a completely different component with the same value. This is the other thing that is going to be really interesting is once we like have the light maps, what I want to do is throw them into this array. So all the light maps that are being kind of used and whatnot, I want to throw those into this GLTF export or optionally have an option where they just get scattered on the file system. But if you do a GLTF instead of a GLB, that happens anyway. You probably need to put the data in the closest non-common node and give it a path to the mesh. Maybe. That gets tough because we're not talking about potentially one collection instance. We're talking about people can arbitrarily nest anything in Blender, right? So you could have instances in instances in instances, and all of those, if you were baking them, you would want them all to get baked. So I think instances is kind of an open question. We could store data on nodes to some extent. I do believe that Blender has a requirement that there needs to be a node on top of a mesh. It does break down in the case of multi-material meshes, which Bevy doesn't currently support and hopefully will in the future. Because multi-material meshes, when they get imported into Bevy, end up being two different meshes. So it'll be like cube.cube.001 and cube.cube.002 if there were two materials on this cube. So yeah, I think instances are a thing that needs to get addressed at some point. But yeah, there's GLTF extras, GLTF mesh extras, GLTF material extras, right? There's also GLTF scene extras, I believe. I think this would work best having the lightmap ID on the node instead of the mesh, maybe. Possibly. That is a definite possibility. The downside of that is the mesh data actually defines the UV map. So definitely the easiest way to find things that need to be light mapped is iterating over meshes. That is not a full solution. But it would work to start with. Let's see. Do all meshes have a parent object Blender? That's a thing that I actually don't know the answer to. It's 2.8. Blender. What is this actually saying? This is saying different parts as separate objects. All the parts can be attached. In these cases, you want to designate one object as the parent of all the children. This is parenting. It can be an object, a bone, a vertex, or a vertex triangle as of 2.8. What is this? Parenting objects. User manual, parenting. Parenting. Armatures, bones. This is parenting objects. Parenting objects. Is that still a page? That is still a page. Okay. Many different types of parenting. Besides parenting the selected objects, some types add a modifier or constraint to the child objects with the parent as the target. Or activates a parent property, like follow path. So all of these can be parents in Blender 5, 4.5. Object, armature deforms, bones, curve deforms, follow path, path constraint, lattice deform, vertex, and vertex triangle. If an object has a pre-existing parent that's cleared first. The thing I'm really curious about is, can you parent meshes to the same object? That's really the thing that I am interested in. Could you maybe try debug log the export process to be able to see at least the iteration order and what data the hook has access to at that point? Absolutely. I actually have all of that set up already. Skein extension. We've got an export extension in here. This is our Skein GLTF export extension. Welcome. Welcome to the back rooms. Couple of things for like lights, checking point sun spot. A couple of documentation things, properties. Here's our export extension. So here's our gather node hook. The issue is not going to be the GLTF export, is what I'll say. Right, the GLTF export, and the reason I open this is kind of like, we need a place to keep the data inside of Blender. And then when it gets translated into GLTF, that we have hooks into everything for, basically. So I'm not terribly concerned about that. Also, when these light maps get exported to GLTF, they're going to be exported. I think I'm going to do it as an extension. We'll see. But we basically want to have like a root manifest that builds the mapping, as well as like hopefully a light map component actually that just points to the image. So looking through all of this doesn't particularly help. We could log stuff out in here, but we've already seen what the data looks like, so we know it's going to come in as a node if it's an instance, etc. I think that when we put these on, made a couple of changes here now. Hopefully the light map mapping still works. Plane, cube, and cube one. Plane, cube, and cube one are all meshes. So the thing that we actually need to attach the light map to is the mesh. And we have to do that by name at the current time. Which is really awkward. So I am tempted to say that we are just not going to do collection instances right now, and that we're going to do this on meshes. And if it works on meshes and you're not using instances, then it'll work. And otherwise, we need to find like a better way to do it. But this allows us to build out like the workflow in a way that does work for certain use cases. And then we can always rearrange some of the code to re-enable like collection instances and stuff. But I think right now, because light maps are like really associated with meshes, they are mesh data. It's just that the instanced mesh data needs its own light map. So I think that's what we're going to go with. Let's get rid of some of this stuff. We don't need these collection instances are hanging around. We do need a couple of these things. So you hit bake, and then I think we do for all meshes. Right. for all meshes, but in the future, maybe we do for all objects in the scene to support collection instances. We check to see if the second UVs exist. If they do, we use them. If not, I think we won't create them right now. Ensure that there's an image per mesh. Again, this is another thing where if we were doing collection instances, this logic gets more complicated. But if we ignore collection instances, then we can do this pretty straightforwardly. We have to create those images, so we got to find a Blender API to create those images, which shouldn't be that hard, I don't think. We've got to set the fake user on that. Also, we have to introduce a new type to store the reference to the image on any mesh. That's another thing that's really easy if we just treat it all as meshes. That gets more complicated if we use instances. And then we call cycles, and calling cycles is just going to be like cycles.bakeImage or whatever. I think I actually, on my other monitor, have the literal command that I need to use. Of course, it has all of my... There's Blender. Has all of my streaming stuff up right now, but... So here's an interesting thing. If we go to scripting, and we do bpi.ops.object.bakeImage, this is basically what we need to do. This API is the bakeImage API. Don't docs. I don't know what you mean by that. So we'll look at both of these. This is just literally going to say bake image textures of selected objects. Great documentation. Can definitely figure out how to use that. And then here, I think this is just the same page, right? Yeah. So we end up with this thing that's like bake image, and it says bake image textures for selected objects. I think we need something a little bit lower level. Because if we do this, this gives us the opportunity to set the operator stuff, right? And then op dot, I don't even know what the properties are here. I don't know if there are any properties. This is the tough part for doing the Skein development stuff, is like, I get bpi.ops.bakeImage, right? And I get one line of documentation. And I think really what we need is the lower level bake. So we have some sizes that I forgot to mention. Bake pass items, type combined is really what we want. So let's do a new file here. Let's just grab, I guess, a random mesh. Bake image textures of selected objects. Of selected objects. That feels wrong. That feels like not what I need. UV layer. Question is, what does bake actually do? targets, fluid, node, bake. Target is going to be an image texture. This is the other thing. It's like bake with associated active image texture nodes. So it's like, okay, so you need to go through and like select things. .bake is a method. Yeah. What does selecting mean in this context? That's a great question. We don't know. Does it literally mean user selected? It might. It might. This is the problem with doing new Blender development on stream is there really is no, this turns into basically like, I'm going to go figure it out at some point. Ops. Right, here's somebody that wants to do it without that. Bake uses internal C code that implements operators that are not exported to Python. So no, you can't bake without using bake. So we have to use bake. Good morning, Sean. How are you? In a reasonable world, you would assume there would be some selection context, but who knows if that's even a thing. There is selected stuff. There is an API for selected things. You can select things. If you do like bpy dot context dot selected, like selected meshes, selected objects, right? No selected objects, but if I click this, now we get the cube. If I drag select, I think we get all three. So we can do selected objects like that. Like there is ways to get that theoretical selection context that you were just asking about. But note how this is objects and not meshes. Pretty good. Hope you're well. Yeah, doing all right. Just finished a boatload of work over the last 2 days, actually. This is why you figure it out and publish a solution on the internet. Your service is appreciated by many. Yeah. Well, hopefully I'll figure it out and it'll be baked into Skein, and then I will have like the way to do it manually, the way to do it in Python, and then like Skein will just do it for you. So we'll have all three. Dealing with the user selection context sounds messy. Can you create your own subcontext? I don't think you can create your own subcontext in the sense that like the only selected things would be in this selected objects field. We can, I believe, add things to the selection and whatnot, but I don't know that we can create like our own selection context in the way that you're kind of implying that you would want to. Right. There's a couple of like, I find the Blender stuff to be really confusing. And not because like the concepts are confusing, but like this is bpy ops node select, right? Select the node under the cursor. Like, okay, select all nodes. Okay. Can I select a specific node? Right? Like that kind of thing. And this isn't even, this is nodes, right? So this will be shader nodes, right? Node operators. This isn't objects. This is like geometry nodes. So I need like object select in that sense. Objects-based selection state. So like the objects have a selection state. Can I go to the object and flick that on and will it get added to the selection? Who knows? It's writable because otherwise it would be labeled as read only. But yeah, it's a lot of like trial and error. It's a lot of like, here's a field. If I change that, does anything happen? Which is not my favorite kind of development, if I'm being honest. I highly prefer the Rust world. Let's see. So bpy object, ops object bake is really what we need, this whole thing. And that's why I wanted to like not do collection instances earlier, because cutting things out in an effort to simplify is really kind of necessary. Def, we're just going to call this bake. And then I'll call bake here. And this will do effectively nothing, hopefully. Right. Import bpy. Name combined is not defined, so I need to figure out like how to actually specify this. I think this is actually single quotes in Python. I think. So now we're getting stuff here. We get rid of some of this. So a bunch of run scripts. If we run this, it runs. Allegedly, it did something. Single or double quotes are the same in Python. Are you sure? I feel like I've seen some things that were enums that required specific quotes. I'm by no means a Python expert. I will say, 100% sure. Cool. What is the? Is there another thing then that's like? I guess all the enums are stringified. If you get the Skein template minimal, I mean, you're supposed to be able to see anything on screen or nah? Nah, there's no camera. It's just showing that there's data in the GLTF, and in the console, you should be able to see that that GLTF data got instantiated. So there's a couple of thoughts that I've had on this. One of them is that like that method of showing it works is minimal, doesn't require a Blender. It just has a GLTF file. Technically speaking, if you can export GLTF from anything, not just Blender, it works with Skein. There's just not much demand for anything other than Blender right now. So the other end of things is people want to see like full games. So I'm working towards something that's a little bit more of a full demo where I can ship a blend file with it and stuff. But yeah, the template minimal is supposed to just be like, hey, there's data in this GLTF. You can read the GLTF, see the data. And then when the scene gets instantiated, it gets instantiated. Although maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I should ship a blend file. Other thoughts that I've had around that are like, if I ship a blend file, then I have to ship a blend file that is like at a specific version of Blender and keep that updated every time Blender updates or not updated, which is kind of annoying. You kind of just want a simple blend so you can make a change and see it without going to make your own. You don't know. Yeah, but you get one if you open Blender, right? Like run the application and open Blender. I do kind of get the like, I just want to see something run vibe. But from a technical perspective, like you have to open Blender anyway. So if you open Blender, you get a scene with the cube and everything. And then it's fetch registry, insert component, export. So like, I don't know. I get it though. I think that there's two things that I could do. There's like a minimal demo that I could do, and then there's a full demo. I think most people are probably going to grab the full demo, but I don't know. We'll see. Whole bunch of stuff. The thing that I want to do for the full demo is basically like Tunic, more or less, or inspired by Tunic anyway. Tons of ways to do it. Yeah, I don't know. I think the demo thing missing is because like I'm pretty good about thinking about how to market things, right? And Skein is not something that I'm trying to market. Like I'm trying to document it so people can use it, but I made it so that I could use it. It works. I know it works. There's a bunch of people using it that don't file issues ever. So it's just like, it's there, it works. It's easy to upgrade from version to version. And I'm not here to sell people on Blender, right? Like if you want to use Blender, oh, now you're about to file an issue. Perfect. Love it. I made it so I could use it as the best way to make something. Yeah. Skein exists because Blenvy existed first. People might not be familiar with Blenvy. It hasn't been around for a while. Blenvy existed first. And I was super excited about Blenvy. Blenvy, unfortunately, the maintainer had life stuff and isn't maintaining it currently. Hopefully they come back, they build it at some point. But you can see like 3 out of the 4 videos, if you search for Blenvy, are like on my channel. I was a huge fan. And it kind of died. So I started looking into how to do the Blender scripting stuff, which I was doing for various reasons. And then kind of realized that like, if I built this thing from the ground up, it would be smaller, like an order of magnitude smaller, literally. Like we're talking the difference between 10,000 and 1,000 or less lines, like an order of magnitude. It would be more maintainable, more predictable, but it wouldn't like try to turn Blender into like its own IDE or like its own, like it doesn't try to make Blender something it isn't, which means that you get all the benefits and negatives of like having to work with Blender, right? Like a collection instance is like literally a collection instance, and that's how it works. But you also get everything from Blender as well. All the add-ons, all the documentation, every video works with Skein. Like there's no special workflow, which is something that I'm pretty proud of. So I don't know, like it's not something that I'm like, oh, people need to go use this and I need to market it. And like, you know, there's no Skein product or anything. It's just as minimal as I could make it. So it's maintainable, and it works. And if you like Blender and you like Blender's workflows, then this is like an obvious, yeah, I want to put component data on stuff in Blender edition. Now we're starting to get into like adding new features now that that's been stable for a long time. So Lightmaps is one of those things where if I can get Lightmaps in, then that means that there's a reason to kind of get people to use it, because then people's games will look better, because otherwise people don't do Lightmaps. The people doing Lightmaps right now have like 3 janky shell scripts and 4 tools that all call into each other and then ring their doorbell. So my goal is to have like a bake button. So people can just hit bake, they get a bunch of light baking, and then yeah. You've done scripting a few times in Blender. It's not fun because docs suck, many out-of-date guides online, but when it works, it's awesome. Yeah, there is a happy path. Absolutely. I just don't think that I'm in it. Are you blind? Is there an export with last settings hotkey? No. You're not blind. There is no, like, you have to open this operator to get to this page to hit this button. There are other things. So you'll see here there's export all collections. If you use a slightly different workflow, this can be bound to a hotkey and it will export all the collections for you. But it's a different workflow. I am going to, in Skein, introduce a new operator that sets all those settings for you and then gives you a hotkey. So that's coming. But it's not in Blender by default. The only thing you can hotkey is bringing that menu up and then hitting that button. So it's still 2 hits. I don't know why this isn't more of a thing, being perfectly honest. But yeah, it's a thing that people run into. It's a thing that I'm going to build into Skein as well. So you will be able to bind like a Skein export operator. And then it will export for you. But today, Lightmaps. So this bakes combined, but where does like the image and stuff go? Right? Like did this go somewhere? I don't think so. Let's see. Where's bake? Dragged myself away from bake. There's bake. So 512, 512 by default. I think that's fine, but we can set it to file path. Let's go to a file path for now, just to make sure it's working. Normal space, or target. Target is what we'll need. Image textures. Save mode, internal. There's a use split materials, which is interesting. Split baked maps per material using material name and output file. Cool. So let's name this test render. Run the bake. I think this should get... We don't even get an error message, so there's that. VS rejected. Real question is, where is this file going? This is not a saved blend file, so let's save the blend file first. This is going to be in this directory, which is temp lightmap Skein. Temp. Yep. Cool. One day I'll find it. Temp. Keep on scrolling. Lightmap Skein. Assets raw. Save. So if we do a file path and we run this, this is the raw PNGs. And these came from the export, I think. I think that the save mode is currently internal, which is weird. Where's save mode? Where to save baked image textures, external. Just for testing purposes. What are the chances this is doing anything? This is the magic of Blender development, my friends. Okay, BPy objects bake, combined external. We have something selected, so it should bake. Save mode external, file path test render. I don't know. Should we throw .png on here or something? Width, height, run. Invalid syntax. Perhaps you forgot a comma. I did. It runs. It was successful. There's nothing interior. There's nothing in here. There's nothing over here. This is where our blend file is. Am I baking to the root directory of my computer? You know? What is the... am I baking to the home or like the root? There's no way, right? No. I don't know where this is going, and I don't know why it's not failing. So type combine, save mode external, file path, test render, with height, run, and what happens? Am I not calling bake? Of course. Of course. White space only matters. Run. No print. Print. Test. Cool. Doing great. Checked home directory. Home directory didn't have it either. All right. Temp touch traces. It would be here with the T's. You need the if name equals main thing. I don't think so. The if name equals main thing, like this should just run, right? So we've got a function called bake. We've got a print. I think that the answer here is that this doesn't show logs. right? Because if I take all of this and I do, we already have bpy, so here's bake. If I def bake and I run bake, now we get something. Oh, please. Let's templates, Python, something simple. What is the simplest thing we can do? Templates, Python, batch export. See, this just runs. So I think the answer is that logs don't show up here. Quick look at Stack Overflow. Looks like you need to create an image object and call save render method on that object. Yes, that makes sense. I'm right now, I just want my script to run. Blender script, logs. Usually, okay. Unfortunately, maybe this is the case that I have to actually start Blender from the CLI. I think it just scoops up all of this data, and maybe this works. Hang on. Now we're just dumping stuff. Nope. Doesn't matter. Created that file though, so this script is running. So really that's it. Really the issue is I'm going to save this. We're going to run Blender from the CLI so that we can actually see the output. It's wild to me that we have to do this, right? But if I run Blender, first of all, it pops up on my other monitor because why would I want it on this one? And then we'll make this a little bit smaller because, you know, logs are noisy. And we'll go to scripting. We'll create a new file. We'll dump our file in. Actually, let's open the blend file first. Open recent, untitled. Don't save. Okay, so we've got our thing selected. We've got whatever. We run this, and then this is where we see the errors. Are you maybe logging the Blender standard out? Yes, that's what's happening. You even manually registered the type for a copy paste of the character component and it doesn't show up. How did I bork? What did you do? You shouldn't have to register the type. The type registry in 0.17, there is automatic registration. So unless you're using generics, it should register the type for you. You do have to derive reflect and reflect the component data. I'm curious as to what you ran into because that's just useful information for me. But okay. Print. We're just going to do a couple of prints up here. Right. We don't need this. So here we go. No active image found in material for object cube. So we need an image on the material. And it needs to be the active image as well. So the question is, can we avoid those requirements? Or is that like a thing that we absolutely have to do? We got baked target types, image textures, baked image data blocks associated with the active image texture nodes and materials, or baked to the active color attribute. So we want image textures, which is the default. Save mode says external, but it still needs an image to bake to for some reason. File path for external saving. Margin selected active is not what we want. We don't want any of this cage object stuff. Target. So we don't really get any options. We have to do it Blender's way. The only alternative is digging into C code to do the baking stuff, is what it looks like. You didn't do edit fetch. Yeah. I have it set up to do, yeah, you heard the beep, Fukasu. I have it set up to be a hotkey for that search. Which should be F3, I think, for you by default. I always forget people don't do that or have that set up by default, though. Okay, so there is a button in the Skein Bevy panel. It says fetch remote registry. It would show up right here. If there is no registry data, there's a little button here that says fetch remote registry. You can click it. If you didn't see the button and you saw this interface, then you already had registry data. Dropping by quickly, can't stay much longer. Just want to say thanks for what you're doing for the Bevy community. Hope to catch stream another time. Cool. Later. Appreciate you. But now you have data and you want the modifications. So you just want a button like right here. We might be able to put a button right on the panel. A refetch button. Can you file an issue for that? Perfect. Thank you. That should be pretty easy because that's just an operator. So I will say that the I personally find using like F3 or this command palette to be easier for that. But I know that not everybody has that set up, so it might be worth putting a button here. Okay, so we need to create an image associated with the material, and we need to do that programmatically. So we're kind of assuming, I think we're going to have to make some assumptions about the material setup. Right? So unfortunately, if the image has to be associated with the material, that feels really weird. Right? Because what if you have the same material on multiple... We're in layout here, right? So here's a cube 1, cube 2. They both have materials. They're different materials, like material and material 2. And I've got material 1 here. What if I have, I don't know, a UV sphere, and this uses material. Because I know if you put data on these, it's attached to the material, not the mesh. So it feels weird. Objects have an active material and even an active material index. Yes, they absolutely do. They definitely do. but I need to create the image is really the thing. I guess material could have, let's look at BPy extras too. Material could have a helper function for that, right? And this is where I start to get interested in how other baking tools are doing it. Because everybody's got to be using the same thing, right? Blender Bake add-on, open source. Bake Lab. How does Bake Lab do it? 5 years ago? Probably recent enough. Bakelab.py. They've got to call bake at some point, right? Bake, 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 bake. Baker, baker. Self at engine equals cycles. Object bake. Invoke default self.type. All of the options are here, margins, etc. Self.baked texture. Self here is the Bakelab operator. Material texture slots add. Textures, new name. Image, baked texture.image. Texture coordinates UV. So texture slots add looks like what we want. So material, the type. This would show us the texture slots. Texture slots add doesn't exist anymore. Is there a repo for the Skein website? Same repo, different branch. So you can just file it on the Skein repo. If you're trying to make a PR, you can do that too. It's just on the docs branch in the Skein repo. Does it have to be associated with a material? To use bake, it seems like it does. So we've got BPy objects, object bake, right? And I think this has to be associated with a material. Because when we run this, the issue we get is context is incorrect, right? Because I don't have anything selected. Right, so you have to have something selected. You have to have an active image, not just an image, but an active image in the material for the object. Let's see. Add new render slot. I wish there was, like, we were talking about documentation the other day. And it's like, if this is the documentation you write, you've missed something. Okay, yeah, that's how Blender works. If you're clicking around, kind of makes sense. Yes. Yes. I want it to not have to rely on anything like that. And I know that, so I do have baking add-ons, right? Like I've purchased baking add-ons. And I know that the way that they work, like here's all our bake groups for this particular blend file, right? Here's a couple of bake groups, pick some objects, pick a UV map, whether it's global or not, global bake assets directory, couple of settings. You can see the margins and stuff. So like this is very clearly the same bake command because of these margins and stuff. I don't think QBaker is open source. I think QBaker is private. Maybe it's not. It's hosted on GitHub. I didn't mean either of those things. This is hosted on GitHub. This is probably a private repo. b3dhub.github.io. So add-ons, add-on template, Blender to Godot, Blender to Unreal, Blender to Unity, QuickBaker docs. So let's take a look at the license first before we look at any source code. GPL v3. So I think we won't look at the source code here. I think we'll avoid looking at this. Like, like obviously it's just looking for API usage, but you know, BPy just automates Blender. It's not what Blender calls under the hood. You had that backwards in the past. You have a script like you would actually do things in the GUI. Yeah. Yes. I'm not sure where in the stream you were referring to. What do you mean that's exactly what it does? I'm not sure what that's in reference to. This has texture slots.add. Okay. It's not texture slots add, it's texture slots.add. So texture, because it's a collection property, right? Which of course doesn't exist in the search. Material, texture slots, not here. Inherited from make local, library, asset data, users, etc. Particle settings, blend texture. This has material.texture slots right here. So maybe it's bpy.props. Maybe I clicked on bpy.types. Types, material operators, material ID. Copy, new. You hate the Blender API docs don't have any source button. You use that all the time in docs.rs. Yeah, I mean, there is the GitHub repo. We could go to the Blender GitHub repo. The thing that gets me, blend data.materials, context material. This is a material type. If it's a material type, it should have a texture slot, right? What kind of slots do we have here? Texture paint slots. Material slot. That's it. Texture slot defining the mapping and influence of a texture. Okay, let's look at this code over here. This is going to be like the selected object, right? So like bpy.context dot selected object. We're just going to get the first one for kicks. This is going to be cube. This is then going to be active material. After active material, can I easily view this bigger? Control space. There we go. bpy context selected attributes active material dot texture paint slots. Is that what it is? Blender material texture paint slots. Texture slots. The combination of images associated with UV maps is called slots. Okay, so that's an image with a UV map. That's something that we definitely want. Selecting a paint slots or canvas image will also display material. Active paint texture index. Cool. This is useless. This is texture painting. Physics rendering. I'm curious to know one thing before I continue there. If we go to shading for the currently selected object, and I add a texture that is a, I don't think one of these is what I want. Color output. This is input. Image texture. So this is an image texture. We're just going to create a new image. Rando image. 1024, 1024. Right. Let me go back to scripting. This is selected. That's the important part. And it bakes. I have no idea if it's done. It is. That's the other thing that I want to figure out. When you hit bake, it's going to look like Blender froze. Okay, so this image is now this. So that's all we need to do programmatically. So my question then is, what happens now? Right? Because theoretically, these are both the same image, right? So image 2, which is still the same for both of them. That's the confusing part for me, I think. We can bake this. It'll bake. It'll do the combined stuff, which includes the light map information. But we can make that more granular, right? And that stores it in an image. And now we have images called image 2 and rando image, right? That are in the material. Is there a way to... Is there a way to figure out what's using these images? Because these bake group images don't show up in the shading, right? Like they aren't here. So if they're not here, where are they? Are they programmatically created and therefore invisible? In which case, these are all protected from deletion in their own materials. There's the key. I think that's the key anyway. I think they are their own materials, which is weird. Okay, so let's like look here. And then these are the materials with those baked textures. So if I look at one baked and I go back to shading, this should have the image. There's the image. So this has UV map to bake group, and bake group is just an image. So it's the same thing. They're just creating a custom material. So that's interesting. That is interesting because I think it's interesting because I wonder what happens. What does bake group do if we have a collection instance? Because if that's images, right? If that's let's get rid of this one. Delete. I don't know how interesting this is for stream, by the way. I think the Blender development cycle here is very much a lot of this repeatedly. It's very much like try to figure out what Blender is even trying to do. If there are any other sources, try to figure out what they're doing. It turns out that the key insight here is that they're just creating additional materials, which I guess is this checkbox. So I guess we could uncheck that, right? But my guess is the material is the user of the baked light map. semi-intended for maybe usage, accelerating content. This is digging into Blender. It'll be great once we have Lightmaps working, because then we'll just be able to like build stuff, bake the Lightmap, and then have cool stuff. But like, baked. So this bakes everything. It's funny that it just jumps from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3. So I kind of generally have a question about what this tries to do if we don't have create, well, two things actually. Let's try without create material, let's create a new bake group. Let's introduce a new object. Yet another cube. Revenge for the default cube getting deleted all the time. Let's make this just red cube, right? We'll add this object. This is cube 2 right now. I think it's cube 2 right now. So we've got a material, cube 2 combined. Do not make the material, and then we bake. And what happens? Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, baked. This did not bake out. No, bake group, bake group, bake group. It did bake out. It baked out to an external image. That's what it did. So if we bake to an external image, maybe we don't need that image node. But in our script, we have save mode external. Let's see. Save mode external file path, but it's not doing external, it's doing internal. So let's go check the docs for bake, which I have somewhere. Right? External, save the map in an external file. Bake, file path, margin cage, use clear, save mode, target. So target is image texture. Says this is optional. Save mode, we've set to external. I thought we set it to external, right? Save mode equals external. Save mode, external. File path with, and this doesn't save it to disk. Active UV layer. Selected active, margin type, margin, file path, type. Type is, in this case, we're doing combined, but we could do like shadow and diffuse instead or something like that. I wish there was more documentation. Blender. That's not what I want. I literally never want to click that button. Blender. Search for bake. So I think this calls engine bake, which is just this. Here's engine. Cycles bake. This is cycles bake, which is a C file. So who knows what this does? Free Blender memory if possible. Commented out function call. Sick. So bake here, like get cycles and calls cycles bake with an engine session, a depth graph, pointer, an object pointer with height, pass filter, pass type. Thus this calls engine bake. That's not the function we're calling though. Different function signature. What is it, 10:30? Not much bevying today. A lot of blendering. Okay, I think what this is going to take is some experimentation. There's a couple of things I can do. I can create some images. I can try to target those images. I don't think I can. I don't think Bake even takes, right? File path. It doesn't take like a handle to an image or anything. So it's got to be handled through that material stuff. The other thing that I was going to look at was, now there's Bake 3, right? But is there Bake 3? Oh, you know what? Actually, all of these images now have 0 users. That's super interesting. Are they just recreating the same material over and over to do the bakes? Do they have like a pre-set up material? Because now 1, 2, and baked. You think you can set up your own cycles render? Intern cycles Blender add-on engine? I think intern is internal, right? So, and I assume you are pointing out a C file. Intern cycles Blender add-on. Intern cycles Blender add-on engine. We were just in this file. And then this is underscore cycles. Underscore cycles implies to me that this is an internal cycles library that is not supposed to be used. You only get 3 Oh, you're in init, but yeah, definitely internal. Yeah. So yeah, it's a matter of, I think, just lining everything up correctly. And then once we line everything up correctly, the other thing that is important is how do we actually hide what it's doing? Because we don't want to, well, yeah. I think we don't want to scatter a ton of materials. That feels really weird. Like creating 20 materials for 20 objects feels really weird. I think that we will have to, even if we have like a staging material, if you will, like the material that is responsible for all of the rendering. Hmm. The other thing that's really interesting is light probes. So after I get light maps done, which should be the easy part, at some point I'm going to look into light probes. As the final objective to have one texture with the color and lighting in it, or one texture for color, one texture for lighting, i.e. using the light map component. Using the light map component. The goal is to use the light map component. The way that Blender seems to make us set it up is that these materials need to have a texture associated with them like this. It can be like a free floating texture. It doesn't need to do anything, but it needs to like effectively live here like this inside of the material node. Now that confuses me a little bit because what do you do if you're baking lighting to a collection instance? And I guess the answer is you don't. But questions like that are going to take some experimentation to figure out, I think. But that's where all of the gritty pieces of the Blender stuff jump in. It's basically like, because you can't just call bake this to image, you have to do a bunch of setup and then theoretically also tear down. And because it depends on how contextually everything is set up, you end up with like a really awkward workflow. Because like ideally, I don't even want, like, people don't even need to be aware of the fact that this image is being associated with a given instance. I think let's get, the other thing that's interesting is new collection, throw this in, collection instance, right? And this is collection 2. And if I put this over here, it should have a different light map, right? But it only has one material. So bake group right? Cube plane, cube 1, cube 2. We actually can't even access this to put it on. Literally cannot use a light map with a collection instance. So I think that's kind of our answer there. Collection instances aren't meant to be used like this. I think we could make it work in Bevy, but it doesn't seem like Blender wants you to do anything to collection instances. Looks like they all have to have basically the same data. So maybe we could hack something and make it work and export a light map anyway. But yeah, that's interesting. So in that case, I have a second question, which is, what happens now? So here's cube 2, and then there will be cube 3, right? And this will be cube 3, which is the same material, which if we bake all of this, hopefully gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bakes. So here's our 3 and 4. And they're definitely different. So that's interesting. Right? Bake group 3 and bake group 4 are definitely different, even though they share the same material. So my question then, I guess, is what's going on with that image? Is it just temporary storage anyway? So we need one temporary storage image, right? Shading. Click on this one. Click on this one. Neither of them have images. Right? No materials are being created. The bake group 4 image exists. So that's a question. Have to go now, catch some sleep later. Thanks for hanging out. I think I'm going to end soon anyway. I think this is going to basically come down to I need to take this off stream and I'm going to just bang my way through it. And I'll document everything that I know and all the decisions, but this is the thing. It's basically like try to call some functions, see what they do. Maybe they do what you expected, maybe they don't. Work your way forward. It's nice to know, because there are so many other baking tools out there, it's nice to know that at least somebody else has worked through how to bake to an image that isn't theoretically embedded in this material. Right, there's slots, unless it's just hiding it from us in the UI, which is also very much a possibility. Feels very tough to kind of figure out what's going on here. Materials, this is material 3, right? Meshes. I wish there was like a backwards. So there are no users of these, which is interesting. Which kind of I feel like that kind of tells me that this is like a pseudo material in the background. Like there's some fake material that temporarily gets applied and removed. Right? Because if I sit here and I hit bake, nothing shows up in this material list, which is really interesting. Happy birthday, you added 6 items to the Skein repo. Sweet. Yep. Yep. Cool. 6 items? I only see 3. Oh, 3 PRs. Bump dependencies, update Bevy version in quick start. Oh, you're amazing. You would normally put a description here, but literally talking to you. Sick. Merged. Dependency bump. Sick. Merged. Add a button. Did you add the button here already? Sick. I'm going to run this before I merge it just so that I know where it is. But thank you very much. Wait, no, that if registry, so this will pop up only if the registry is there. Which I think makes sense because we already have a button if the registry isn't there. So this works. I just want to know where it's placed. And then I get to mark these as completed. Right? Oop, that's the wrong one. No. That's what I get for batch operating. Template minimal, quick start page. Button still open. Cool. Thank you. I'll do a docs release soon. And with that, I think I'm done for the day. I'll probably be back tomorrow to stream. I think I'm back on my streaming schedule for the rest of the week. So go back to the PR. Oh, did you already include a screenshot? Cool. Yeah, I'll merge this. I might change the wording, but this is good enough to merge. Layout row, align true. And then it just goes layout. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Hey, it works. It works. Maybe we can stick it like in the drop down up here, you know, in the future. But this works for now. And it's there now. So perfect. Thank you, by the way. That was super helpful. I appreciate you. You're not a Blender dev. You never PR'd Python or anything for Blender. I don't work on Blender either. The only Blender stuff that I do is this Python stuff for Skein. That's it. I guess the only other Python stuff that I do is DaVinci Resolve scripting, really. So yeah, I mean, I'm not Blender dev either. I guess I technically am since I've published an add-on now, but I'm not like a upstream Blender dev. And with that, I'm going to get some food. Thanks everyone for hanging out. I will be back tomorrow. Don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow yet. Maybe language stuff, maybe more workshop stuff, maybe Bevy stuff. Have a great rest of your day.